Thank you for auditing Professor Skye's record review, the only first listen new music review show hosted by a French professor, hoping his family doesn't wake up and start running around upstairs ruining this video. I'm going to be reviewing an album called Lulu by Conway and the Alchemist, and I want to sort of paint a picture for you for why I think not only is this album good, but it's important. You know, we're in quarantine here, it's COVID-19 time in America and the world, and I'm going for a walk with my family, you know, and we're walking around. I live in a nice suburb of Rochester, New York, you know, kind of actually near where, spatially near where Conway's from. Not physically, spiritually, emotionally, or economically, but, you know, physical proximity. And I'm walking around beautiful, you know, green lawns and blue sky, and we're walking, and I see this kid, you know, and he reminds me of me in high school, and he's just sitting out there up front, and he's playing basketball, you know. And like I remember, like when I was a kid, you know, I'd put on my Walkman or whatever, I'd put out a boom box, and like listen to music, and I'd play basketball, and like get in the zone. It's like all this like young ambition and energy, and like misplaced masculine feelings, and all these things. And you know, I'd listen to Led Zeppelin, you know, or I'd listen to NWA, or I'd listen to Public Enemy. I'd listen to music like gets me like pumped up and like psyched, you know. And I walked by this guy, and he's a good kid, you know, and he's sitting there and he's playing basketball. And he's listening to, like, Juice WRLD or something. I can't even make it out. But I'm so sad that I took a Xanax. I wanna die. I'm so sad I can't look straight. Like, come on, kid. You're in high school. You're playing basketball. No one in the world loves you. No one understands you. I get it. I want to listen to sad music that makes me think about wanting to kill myself too. I want to listen to downbeat music. I'm not against Juice WRLD. I'm not against this kind of music. But you're playing basketball. You're doing something that requires energy. You want something dark. You want something dirty. You want something that gives you that feeling of just like ice going through your veins. That's why we need artists like Conway and Griselda that he's from. That's why we need good hip-hop music. There's an emotional and spiritual need for this kind of music. If I walked by and this guy were listening to any of the 7 tracks off of Lulu, I'd be like, yeah, that's right. That kid's got it. Now listen, I'm just being an old man, okay? So maybe that's the problem, you know? Maybe he listens to, you know, why did you leave me? I want to drink cough syrup. Maybe that gets him pumped up. I can't imagine why. Maybe it does. But what I love about this album, this one in particular, Conway with the Alchemist, is that the Alchemist is a lot like me. He's a month younger than I am. He's from, get this, Beverly Hills. You know, he's a privileged white guy who listened to hip-hop music when he was, I don't know, playing basketball, hanging around in his house, doing whatever it is people do in Beverly Hills. And he got that feeling. And I've been talking about this on the channel for months, you know. Yes, hip-hop started in the inner city in America, and it's representation, the voice of the voiceless. But it's way more than that. It's also an expression that can be adopted by anybody, anywhere, anytime, regardless of gender, race, class, or anything. And this is a guy who heard this music and said, this is what I want to make. This is what I want to do. And he is a very, very good beat maker. So that's my sort of basic concept of how I'm going to be approaching this album. That this is a great album to remind you of why hip-hop is so great and has such punch and has such power. Not everybody hates me, everybody loves me. It's not just that. So let's get to the other part of the album, the more important part, the Conway part, okay? I had never heard of Griselda. I do a music review show. I don't pretend to be a music expert. If I say things that are wrong, I invite all my watchers to comment in the sections about how I'm an idiot. For example, I talked about the samples on the Griselda album and how good they were. Turns out there were no samples at all. It was all just done by Derringer. Thank you to everyone who pointed it out. I didn't know, okay? But the thing that Griselda's doing, and the thing that Conway does, it's actually very similar to what Wu-Tang was doing. I mean, it's hard to tell you how exciting it was to be in the 90s when Wu-Tang were at their apex. before, I think, cocaine took over and just destroyed their brains. That's my theory. I don't know if it's true. But what made being a Wu-Tang Clan fan so great was like you get really excited for the release of some kind of super gritty, awesome, crime-drenched, pop culture-drenched masterpiece, you know, from the mothership. And then in between the albums, they just kept on releasing more and more and more solo joints that were really good. Where you got to hear the individual voices make such a great and powerful sound. I've listened to some of the other releases from the other solo artists from Griselda, and it appears that they're doing this. So this little EP feels to me as exciting as, I don't know, Liquid Swords. Now, it's not as good as Liquid Swords, okay? I mean, I don't think that the Griselda school is as good as Wu-Tang. But it is really good. It is really well produced, really well wrapped. There's a personality that just goes way beyond what most rappers are doing right now. So that mixture of like talent and personality, which I don't know how Wu-Tang got like at least 5 of their members to have maximum talent and maximum personality at the same time. They were able to do that, and that's what this is like. But that's not my only framing device for this album. You see, I was listening to the album, and first of all, the cover is a great white shark, which is like, okay, that's cool, that's scary. I hate great white sharks. I mean, I don't hate them, I'm scared of them, right? And then the album's called Lulu. I was like, what does that mean, Lulu? Is this like about yoga pants? Like, what's this going to be? And I look at the track listing. You know, they got Sunny, 14 kilograms. I can guess what that's about. Calvin, gold BBSs. I'm like, what's going on here? It felt, before I listened to it, that there had to be some kind of background, some kind of way that this album was being put out that was cohesive. And so I was listening, and there's all these movie clips all throughout. And I just assumed they're from this movie and that movie. It's, you know, mostly talked about selling coke and moving coke and selling coke and moving coke. But I thought, you know, I'm just gonna look up one of the quotes. I'm just gonna look up Lulu character on Google. And it turns out this entire album basically is all samples from one movie. That's the 2002 movie by Charles Stone III, I believe, he might be junior, called Paid in Full. This is accidentally also a movie review. If you haven't seen Paid in Full, it is an amazing, I don't know what the genre is called. I guess they're called hood movies. I don't know. I was tempted to call, you know, and some people called them blaxploitation movies of the 90s, but the movies that followed Boys in the Hood, that followed Menace to Society, that depicted inner city America and the life of young African Americans towards the end of the 20th century. I don't really know what we call it. I used to call them hood movies. I don't know. I'm just going to call them that for now. I didn't see this when it came out. I hadn't seen it until 2 days ago, because it came out in 2002. So I was already like living in France, and I wasn't really paying attention. And, you know, I just sort of said, oh, it's one of those movies. I'm going to give you homework. I'm a professor, so I'm going to give you homework. This week, listen to Lulu by Conway at least 10 times. And also, watch Paid in Full. And you'll see how they all go together. It's like, Lulu is not trying to be like a soundtrack to Paid in Full, you know? Like, it mentions character names, and there's a couple character beats placed in, but it's not like, you know, my name is Ace, and I'm here to say, I sell lots of coke in a major way. It's not like that, right? It's like the atmosphere of that movie, of these 3 guys who are trying to, like, well, really this one guy, this likable guy who goes from having a good job at a dry cleaner and then becomes a coke kingpin, and it's very engaging, very well done, very well edited, lots of good parallel editing, very well acted. The main problem with the movie is that there's a couple characters who call everybody B, but the lead character's name is A, so there'll be lines of dialogue like this. I just can't do it, A. You know what I mean, B? I just can't, I gotta eat, B. That's what I gotta do, A. So he making his way all the way through the alphabet, but he never made it to C. So every single song, every title in here is a reference to the movie. And it's just a very enjoyable experience where you're really plunged into this world of like selling drugs and being in the ghetto and trying to make money and having rivals. And it's interesting because, I mean, this movie is Paid in Full, I think, is particularly important because there's a interesting thing about what made The Sopranos so good, right? So The Sopranos, the mafia show from HBO, is that one of the goals was to show the way that the mafia became more influenced by mafia movies than they were by actual life. Like, you know, Coppola made The Godfather, and Scorsese made Goodfellas, and these gangsters were watching that and trying to be like it. I've often put forth the question about Griselda, like, they rapped basically exclusively about selling coke, and my point is, it doesn't matter if they actually did. It really doesn't. And they might. They probably did. Sure, fine. When I said this in the last video, a lot of people got mad, being like, of course they did. They're as real as it comes. My point is that in hip-hop, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. It's more the idea that they're painting this tableau, they're reflecting something that's happening in society, hyper-capitalism, the result of Reagan, all these things, right? Like, that's what they're doing. That's what artistically matters. It does not artistically matter, you know? Conway could come from Beverly Hills as well. I don't think he did, but he could have, you know? Like, he could have come from there as well. But getting back to this concept that gangsters became more influenced by movies, in this album, you know, the fact that it's all talking about this movie, it's all filtered through this movie, it's kind of a similar thing, where you have, like, rap artists talking about hood movies, and it's like, do they really do the stuff they're doing? Or are they just watching movies and getting inspired? Is this like the RZA being like, I'm a kung fu master, but he's like, no, he's not a kung fu master. You know, like, is this just pop culture influence? Is this like me thinking I'm a Power Ranger? I went to grad school with Skull from Power Rangers, by the way. True story. So, yeah, I think that's what makes this interesting, is it helps to create this full picture, listening to the album, watching the movie. But then in the middle of the movie, there's a whole scene where the characters are watching Scarface. And by the way, I am going to get to a review of the album. I just have lots of thoughts here. The characters are watching Scarface. So, okay. So we have, I actually had to write this down. You have an album rapping about being a gangster, but actually rapping about a movie about people being gangsters who are gangsters inspired by watching a movie about being gangsters. Whoa. My son's been asking me, what does postmodern mean? I think we're kind of there, right? So it's like, all of a sudden, not only are the rappers influenced by the movie, but the gangsters in the movie are influenced by the movie that they're watching in the movie. And it comes down to the point that essentially all gangster rap, everything, it's all Scarface. Everything goes back to Scarface. The beginning and the end. Brian De Palma's masterpiece, well, I don't even know if it's a masterpiece, but Brian De Palma's a severely successful movie about someone who arrives in America with nothing and becomes a kingpin. It's the most ubiquitous movie in all of hip-hop. And it's amazing because, in a way, this whole album dedicated exclusively to Paid in Full is actually a movie, again, dedicated to Scarface. That, like, to love Scarface, you have to ignore that the third act is his downfall. That he's a sad, pathetic man living alone in a bathtub who gets shot like 50 times. You have to ignore that. And I think there's something interesting about the fact that Scarface is so popular, because I just want to tell everybody, like, hey, yeah, it's fun and cool, but it's not actually worth it. He's not a happy guy. He's not a rich guy. He's a dead guy, right? But part of what makes hip-hop interesting is if we take rappers like Jay-Z or Eazy-E or Griselda who claim to, or who actually did, sell crack at some point in their life, and they were kingpins and moving bricks and all that stuff, it skips the end. It gets to the point where Scarface is alone and he rejects his family and he's just alone in his bathtub, and it just hits pause. And then a whole nother movie takes place where Scarface becomes a musician, and all of a sudden he's famous and popular. And he can talk about selling drugs, but he doesn't have to die. And there's a lot of movies, you know, like Goodfellas or whatever, where the gangster, like, sells out to the feds and is able to live a happy, normal life. This is the musical equivalent of that. Like, really, that's what it is. Like, rap music allows us to rewrite the Scarface narrative without the sad ending. And okay, I get it, it's terrible, and crack is terrible, cocaine is terrible, what's happened to the African American community because of crack and Reagan is a travesty. But in these kinds of cops and robbers dynamics, the kind of fun of listening to anti-heroes, it's really made a lot more interesting by this concept that we can have Scarfaces who didn't die. So good. I haven't talked about the album at all. We're like 10 minutes in. I mostly managed to avoid noise from upstairs. Someone flushed the toilet, but I edited that out of the video. So let's actually talk about the album. Now it starts off with an intro. It has actually kind of Scarfaced sounds, like these kind of cheesy synthesizers. And it's nice because we have the introduction of some of the sound clips from the movie. And it's really fun. Like, I don't know if you're like me. I love watching the Shaolin movies and hearing where the Wu-Tang Clan quotes come from because the music is such a part of my head that when I see the sample in the movie, like, I get excited. That's how it feels to listen to this now. 14 Kilos is the first track. Great, inscrutable Griselda-style lyrics about crack and all this weird terminology that I don't quite understand. Lots of interesting ad-libs. It's funny, there's sort of a couple different kinds of ad-libs in the Griselda world. You know, there's woo, 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 and there's drrrr. But then there's a third one, which is actually ironic. It's someone going, ha-ha, which really reminds me, actually, of Puff Daddy. Sort of seen as often the antithesis of good rap from the 90s. But it's like Puffy when he's behind Biggie in like a crime story. Like, ha-ha, ho-ho. So it's funny to have this like album and these rappers who are sort of simultaneously bringing up and bringing back the Wu-Tang banner while also bringing back Puff Daddy. It seems kind of ironic, but there you go. This song has kind of a half-assed hook, which I like. I like that they don't go full, like at no point on this album does he really seem to be trying to make a hit. I don't think Griselda tries to make hits. I think they try to make good music and then that music is popular, which if they continue doing that, they will maintain their relevance and their greatness. It's funny because I don't think he's a great rapper, right? Like, I don't know. If there's other rap heads who are watching this, you can argue with me about this. I'm not positive. I mean, he's a great, I don't know if he's a great lyricist. I guess I'll put it that way. But he's a great rapper because he has this personality, because half of his face was shot off, it adds a different element to his voice. Like, you can actually hear the difficulty in speaking and the way that affects the way that he speaks. And he has just like a really nice flow and cadence that goes through on almost every track on the entire album that makes it so good and so engaging. There's a track called The Contract, and that's got kind of a cool cinematic loop in the back. It sounds kind of like a 70s song, kind of a dreary and menacing feeling. And that's a thing that Griselda is able to set very well. Dreary and menacing. Then, unbelievable song called Shoot Sideways, featuring Schoolboy Q. It's got this great low-key drum beat and this hook that he sings. It's in a semi-reggae voice, and it's just so well done. It's either a cello or a double bass being played with a bow underneath. Do, 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 do. Just awesome. It's just a wonderful song. It's also funny, going back to movies, the idea of shooting sideways, I believe that was an invention of the Hughes brothers in Menace to Society. The character O-Dog, played by, how can I not remember his name? He was a great actor. Anyways, the character O-Dog would always go around shooting people, holding his gun sideways, which doesn't make any sense because the recoil, you'd really hurt your wristies, But anyways, I think that's a funny way of thinking about the way that cinema influences because people started shooting like that, even though it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's like, shaving sideways, I just shaved, that's why. Got that in my head. He has a great line in there. He said that he wants his twisted face on Mount Rushmore, and I think it might get there. I really might. This is just so exciting. This is a really exciting time to be listening to these people's music, listening to Griselda's music and the producers that they find. They're just dropping great albums. The next track is called Calvin. That's definitely the low track, the low point. He's basically doing triplets the whole time, and I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just prejudiced, but I kind of feel like you have to be stupid to rap in triplets. I don't mean Like, what you're rapping about has to be very unimportant. That's the way I feel. When I hear triplets, I think this is just trying to hit a rhythm. And I don't really think about it as having much meaning or weight to the words. This is not quite like that. It's particularly nice at some point they like drop out and bring in some phaser effects for his voice. It's not a terrible song. And he never goes full cheesy and tries to like write a hook that's super catchy. But in general, it's one of the weaker parts. They Got Sunny, that's my stamp. I'm gonna play you 14 seconds of this song soon. It's got these like multiple drones going on at the same time. Like a low drone and like a high drone. And like the beat is just right and the rhymes are really good, so I'm gonna play you 14 seconds of it now.
Only the real street niggas gonna understand me. I'm from where the kids don't get a new jacket and fall roach in the cereal and every spoon black in the drawer. Mama used crack and his pop shoot smacking his arm. He just used that.
Okay, I'm back. Then it's funny because that song features Cormega, and in my head, I had trouble figuring out the difference between Cormega and Cameron. And Cameron stars in Paid in Full. Did they ask Cameron to get in this album? I mean, he's good, right? I reviewed one of his songs recently. He's good. I don't know. It seemed like a missed opportunity not to have Cameron on here. But who knows? Maybe they sent out. Then the album ends with gold BBSs, another reference to the movie. It's cool because they shoot out Onyx. I've done a couple of videos about Onyx, or one video about Onyx. Sort of talk about like trying to become rappers, nice kind of sad, mournful violence. Throughout the album, there's lots of great, very sad, meaningful lyrics. One in particular, I think it's off They Got Sunny, where they talk about like every spoon is black because his, heroin and coke and all that stuff. And just like, that's a great image of the tableau that they paint here. Growing up where every spoon was black. So there you go. There's my long review of Lulu. What kind of name is that? I don't know. It's a name. So there's my review, B. If you think it's interesting, I really suggest you take my homework, watch Paid in Full, listen to Lulu. What else are you going to be doing? Watching The Tiger King? No, this is way more interesting. This is a way better way, more intellectually stimulating way to study depictions of the crack trade in music and film. It's my homework. Post the results in the comments if you want to. All right, well, I'm gonna go make some pancakes and listen to Velvet Underground with my family as I do every Sunday. So there's the camera.